Hi, this is my review of the Pacific 1941-45 game from Worthington. It's part of their Holdfast range. If we have a look at the back of the box, it's a block game and the playing time is 2 hours, which I would agree with. You can basically play the whole of the Pacific theatre in those 2 hours. Complexity 3 out of 10. Suitable. It's a two-player game, but suitable for solitaire. I'd agree with all those points. So let's start with the rulebook first. Not a huge number of pages to the rulebooks, 5 or 6. Nice and colourful, well laid out, quite well written. I didn't have any problems understanding any of the rules at all. There is a second game in this series based basically the Atlantic version, I'll call it. In fact, page 5 actually is examples of combat. So not a huge number of rules. This is a game that you can easily go through the rules and get playing in an evening. Doesn't require a huge amount of study of the rules, which is good. I have no problems with any of the rules in the rulebook at all. I had played old Avalon Hill games back in the day that are somewhat similar to this. There's one I think called Victory in the Pacific, which is very similar to this, and Victory at Sea, which is also sort of similar. So if you're familiar with those older war games, they're both Avalon Hill games, sort of back in the day. I can remember playing them when I was a little boy. Loved them. So it's been a while since I played this type of game. But honestly, the rules are nicely written and they're quite concise. So it's not a huge amount of time to require to go through those. Here you can see the game laid out. This is sort of a mid-progress that I've been playing solitaire. As I say, it's a block war game, so normally you'd have the blocks sort of stood up facing your opponent, so there's a fog of war. Playing it solitaire, you don't need to worry about that. And the map is a hardboard mounted, very nice. The graphic design of the map is really good. It's very readable. You can clearly read the different areas of the game. You are basically fighting for control of each of the seas, and then the ports and control points within those seas as well. So it's sort of an area-based block game. Yeah, and component-wise, it's great. The blocks are really nice and hard-wearing. I've had this game feel like a couple of years now. Played it a handful of times, both two-player and solitaire. Yeah, components are top-notch. So have a quick closer look at the blocks. Each individual ship has its own block. The information that you need to play the game is on the block. Because it's a block game, it has that great mechanic of every time the ship takes a hit, you simply rotate the block around, which is one of the things I love about block war games. It has 2 numerics on the block. The first numeric on the left is the number required on the dice rolls for the opponent to hit and damage the block, and the number on the right is the number of dice that you're going to be rolling to inflict damage on them. They're color coded, so the yellow blocks are, or the blocks, sorry, with the yellow number there, that represents an aircraft carrier, whereas without colors they represent different things. So battleships and so forth. There's submarines. There's also air support blocks from like that one there. So there are a variety of different ship classes or block classes in the game, and again, components top notch. So the mechanics that I enjoy about the game, they're very straightforward. Combat is straightforward. You use the combat area over in the top left of the map there. You have the ships face off against each other. There are submarines. You can use either, decide to do sort of a ship-to-ship combat or air combat as well. Plays out pretty well, very straightforward. The combat doesn't take very long to play. So for example, in this area here, the Marshall Islands, this is a Japanese controlled area, and there's going to be a naval battle between the American forces and the Japanese forces. Once they've both encountered, you take those blocks away, put them over into the top section of the map there, and do the battles there. The battles don't take very long. I'll be honest with you. They are quite dice rolly, so each of these blocks here, for example, is on average rolling 3 or 4 dice. So there's a lot of you get some nice chunky dice in the game, but it is quite dice rolly. You tend to need high numbers to hit. So, for example, here we've got the New Mexico. The opponent needs 6s on that to hit it, on d6s, but they may be rolling, for example, 5 dice to be able to hit that. So the combat's quite decisive, pretty quick. It's not a huge amount of chrome to the combat. I will probably call out the mechanics within the combat are quite nice. So how they use submarines, how they use aircraft carriers, and so forth. Don't need to go into every single mechanic, but you can play a round of combat in literally 2 or 3 minutes, depending on how many blocks are involved. Movement, likewise, is very, very straightforward. Your blocks move from one area to another. They can move through friendly controlled, broadly speaking, areas, and then when they encounter an enemy area, that's where they generally stop. Submarines, however, can have complete they have complete control. They can move anywhere, which is great. Controlling each area gives you victory points. If you're familiar with those old games, like I mentioned, you'll be instantly familiar with how this game works. But controlling the seas gives you control of them. That in turn gives you victory points. So, for example, here in the Coral Sea, if the allies have got control, which they do in this game, they gain 2 victory points. Conversely, if the Japanese had it, they'd get 2 victory points as well. You flip that over to show the Japanese have it. But in some of the areas, it's different victory points depending on who owns it. So, yeah, South China Sea, for example, over there, if the Japanese control it, they have 3 victory points. If the Allies control it, they get 1 victory point. And at the end of every turn, you add up the victory points for the areas you control, and you have at the top there a chart to show those victory points. It's very straightforward system, and it's fun. It's a fun system. I'd also say that what I like about this game is you can play the whole thing in a couple of hours. The blocks look great. The artwork of the ships is nice and tidy, and you do feel that you're playing that sort of Pacific theatre at a naval base, which is what this game really is about, in an evening comfortably, and that includes skimming through the rules if you haven't played it for a little while. And that's one of the great things about it. So, in conclusion, things that I think this game does really well: great quality components, a slim number of rules, so you can get up and playing pretty quickly, and the gameplay length is a couple hours. There's a lot of good strategic level decision making that you need to do. So you need to work out which areas you're going to attack, how you're going to split your forces up. There's a big stack of, you can't see them off camera, but there's a big stack of blocks here for the Allies. So there's different reinforcements per turn. Generally speaking, if I could say, I think the Japanese have a harder time of it in this game. But then it has that historical flavour, so that's there. And like I said, you can play the whole thing in a couple of hours. I've played this game with my kids, right? And they've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's straightforward mechanics. Nothing's too complicated, but there is a good amount of decision making to be had. And it's fun. I think this is I grew up playing more War at Sea, actually, from Avalon Hill. And that was the thing I liked about it. It stirred my imagination. I grew up watching those old World War II films about the Pacific, and so I love all that theatre, that drama, and this game for me captures that at a board game level. I think if you were playing, and that's probably who it's really aimed at, really. So if you're in the market for wanting to play a naval themed game set in the Pacific with great blocks and a really nice map and rules that are very straightforward, not too complicated, and you want to play the whole thing in 2 hours, I think this is a great game and delivers on all those things. Game that I've thoroughly enjoyed playing a lot. game that I've enjoyed playing with people who don't normally play war games. So I think it does that really well. Playing it solitaire, there's no solitaire rules. You're playing two-handed. I will play this solitaire from time to time simply because I love the theatre so much, and I love the narrative of it. And at the end of the day, moving blocks around with pictures of battleships on is it's cool, right? So I enjoy that element to it. I enjoy the period of history, so it's a worthwhile experience from that perspective. So yeah, another great game in the range from Holdfast. I also have the Atlantic version as well, so I may well do a review of that the next time I pull that off the shelf. And yeah, thanks for watching.